Life is too heavy. I can't carry it anymore. And then the thought came, I cannot live with myself any longer. It was such intense unhappiness. The depression was so heavy that something had to give. There must be two of me here, because if I can't live with myself, then who is the I and who is the self? Is there one of me here or two? In my life, this was a shift in consciousness. Intense unhappiness is sometimes called depression, anxiety, periods of anxiety and depression. Throughout my 20s, and even in childhood, I was already deeply unhappy. I remember we lived in a 3 or 4-story house, and when they were painting the facade of the building, they put up scaffolding. I was about 6, and I thought to myself, when I'm older, if I ever want to end my life, I can just climb up there. One night, a thought came into my head. I describe it briefly in The Power of Now. In the middle of the night, I cannot live with myself any longer. It was such intense unhappiness. The depression was so heavy that something had to give. And in that moment, an inner separation happened. At the time, I couldn't have explained it. Looking back now, I can, because now I understand it. I was a being made up of images, ideas, and an inner dialogue running in my mind. That inner dialogue, that's familiar to most people. But in my case, it was simply destructive. You probably know this inner dialogue. I sometimes call it the voice in the head. It's just an automatic, compulsive stream of thought that never stops. It comments on your sensory perception, on what's happening around you. You can recognize it. You might already know it well, if you've ever observed your own mind. And in my case, this voice was predominantly negative. So the emotions I was constantly feeling were a reflection of that predominantly negative inner narrative about myself, about other people, about the situations I found myself in. And there were plenty of reasons for the negative self-talk. I was struggling. I didn't have enough money. I was trying to make something of myself, working too hard. I had trouble finding a girlfriend. I was too shy. Inside me, there was every kind of trouble. So in essence, it was an unhappy self, but I had falsely identified with it. And then, suddenly, I thought, I can't live with myself any longer. And then there was a stepping back from that thought. I thought, are there two of me? Or am I one? What does it mean? I can't live with myself? Who am I? And who is the self I can't live with? That thought led to a separation. And then something happened. That unhappy self was somehow recognized as unreal. What was left felt fresh, new, light coming through the curtains. The simplest objects on the table, carrying a certain harmless, miraculous presence. I noticed that everything was beautiful, a fundamental piece. What is this? I was living in London at the time. I got on a bus that was going through the center of the city. Everything was so peaceful. It was so strange. In my life, this was a shift in consciousness. And much later, when I started exploring the spiritual traditions, Buddhism, mystical Christianity, Gnosticism, Sufism, Zen, and the great Hindu teachers, gradually, I began to understand that what had happened to me is called a spiritual awakening. The understanding didn't come first. First was simply the experience of it. The background to all of this was several years of inner anxiety and depression through my early 20s. By the way, I started university quite late because originally I didn't have the required qualifications. I'd left school at 14. Eventually, I did get into university, and in my course of study, I worked extremely hard. I didn't fully realize it at the time, but years later, I ran into someone who'd been a student then in a different department. He told me, "You were always working until midnight in the library." I'd noticed that, yes, I was working out of anxiety that I wasn't keeping up. And after I finished university, I graduated with distinction. I was happy for 2 or 3 weeks. Then the anxiety and depression came back. And by the time the night arrived, that became the turning point. I was living in a small room in a flat in London. I'd just finished university. I didn't know what to do next. I woke up again, in the middle of the night, with an extremely active mind. At that moment, of course, I was living through my mind and didn't know there was an active mind because I was the thinking process itself. I had every kind of reason to feel fear, uncertainty about the future, where would I live, what I wanted to do, dissatisfaction with who I was as a person, a feeling of inadequacy, and so on. All of it creating an incredible amount of anxiety. My senses felt completely cut off from the outside world. I felt alien, a stranger. I remember looking at objects in the room. They felt completely foreign to me. Years later, I read a novel. I don't remember much of it now, that described that same feeling. The unhappiness, the fear, as I lay in bed. At some point, a thought arose. Life is too heavy. I can't carry it anymore. And then the thought came, I cannot live with myself any longer. The thought repeated itself a few times. And then, suddenly, there was a moment where I became aware of it as a thought. And I said, I cannot live with myself. What does this mean? There must be two of me here, because if I can't live with myself, then who is the I, and who is the self? There was an I. Observing this statement my mind had made, I saw, strangely, myself split into 2 parts. Who am I, and who is the one I can't live with? Is there one of me here, or 2? That was the last thought. The answer to this question did not come as a thought. In that moment, I didn't understand what was happening. I can explain it now. I couldn't explain it then. The answer came as a kind of inner step, not through analytical thinking. It was a realization that this self I couldn't live with had no reality behind it. It was the unhappy self. Its illusory nature was seen, not understood through thought. Seen as illusion. What dissolved was the entire sense of self that had been burdened with unhappiness, anxiety, inadequacy. That self kind of dissolved because I was no longer fully identified with it. I had stepped out of it. So what remained? What remained was simply the sense of self as consciousness, not as the unhappy I. The unhappy I became, and then something happened to it. I felt almost, it wasn't quite an experience of dying, but it was the death of the unhappy self. Not so much visual, as on the level of sensation. There were no words pronounced. I simply let everything go. And then a kind of passage opened. Not a visual one. I don't remember other details. I think I fell asleep soon after. Later, the question arose, but I couldn't answer it at the time. The inner separation between the I and the self that had been created in my mind. I'm explaining it now. Back then, I couldn't explain anything. It just happened. It took several years. I don't know how many, maybe 7 or 8 years, before I could explain it. The way I'm explaining it now. In the morning, after what had happened that night, the first impression was that everything around me